Alright, so we're going to have a chat about how our how we feel our start collecting sets have been. So we'll start off with the monetary aspects of it then. So I don't know about you guys, but I saved a fair bit of money by buying the start collecting box. To purchase the models separately, so that's a Dune Crawler, a Dominus, and a box of Skitarii Rangers / Vanguard would cost £85.50. So I saved myself £35.50 through the box. This is obviously not counting any of the extra stuff, like the fact that I had to buy 2 codexes to run the Force, or any of the cards or anything like that as well. So this is just for the models themselves.
I don't think it's unusual for people who are just starting out to not own the codex. And use the shop bought copy for the first few games at least. The Space Marine one, I don't think you save anywhere near that kind of money. I think you would pay just over £50 for the Dreadnought and the Tactical Squad, and then you can't actually get the particular Space Marine Terminator Captain that you get in that set individually, but if you assume that it'd be about the same price as a individual model.
He is available in a box set with some Terminators for about £35 as well.
Then you'd also get the Terminators.
Then you'd also get the Terminators, but it's interesting that they have these models that are box set exclusive, because my Ethereal is also one, and you can only get him in the Start Collecting box. If you grabbed the Burning Dawn Force set that they did a couple of years ago, and he's also available in a box set with the Cold Star Battlesuit. But yeah, that's quite good. I got a savings of about £35-ish.
So about the same for the Tau and the Skitarii.
Yeah,
but it's about £5 and then whatever you value the Terminator Captain at. So.
Yeah. Interestingly to note, there's no special models at all in the Skitarii set. You can buy
the Eldar. It's a saving of £26, and I think it's worth factoring in that unlike the other sets we've looked at, that is not a 500-point force. And no way can you make it a 500-point force.
You can just win 2 out.
You do win most games.
So it's not 500 points, but you can still win in 500-point games using the Eldar if you know what you're doing with them. That's the important thing, I think.
Yeah.
Because a new player might not necessarily know how to play using the advantages that the additional manoeuvrability that you get from the jet bikes can bring you.
There's certainly a lot to be said for learning the importance of terrain, and that army will teach you that, because otherwise you will lose over and over again, or you might just lose over and over again.
Maybe. Okay. So the next 500 points. So if we take what we've got and we say, for argument's sake, that we can make 500 points worth of army out of it. Obviously, that's not quite the same with the Eldar kit. But how are you guys looking to expand your army into the next 500 to make it into around 1,000 points?
Mine's nice and easy because I'm doing Ultramarines, so I want to maximise the use of my chapter tactics, Assault Marines, Devastator Marines, Rhinos, maybe a drop pod. It should be, monetary wise, if we're going to keep talking about that, somewhere in the region of another £100 on top to get to 1,000 points. I think actually a little bit more. It will cost me less because I've got Rhinos already.
Yeah.
Well,
I've
got Razorbacks already.
I was going to say, what about adding a Razorback?
I keep confusing Rhinos and Razorbacks because in my Chaos Force I can't have Razorbacks, but I can have Rhinos with Havoc launchers. So obviously I build them as Razorbacks.
Yep.
Yes. So the tower are interesting. There's lots of ways you can go from this starting force. The obvious and quick answer is to say buy another box of Start Collecting. You get another set of battle suits and another set of fire warriors, which will allow you to play around more with some of the special rules like marker lights and get more interesting things doing with deep striking and being able to specialise your battlesuit teams. You could either have one big battlesuit team or just 2 3s as they are appearing, and then one can be anti-vehicle, one can be anti-purpose, one can be whatever you need. But for me, I'm definitely going down the route of grabbing some more fire warriors, and I will probably grab a Cadre Fireblade just to give them some non-ethereal HQ support.
Yeah, a squad of sort of 10, 12 fire warriors with a Cadre Fireblade. There's a huge amount of firepower you can get out of that.
Indeed. Another thing I'll probably throw in there is some piranhas, some light skimmers to dance about the field, and just even if they annoy people generally, but even if they never really do much firepower on their own, they can all take 2 Seeker missiles, which when they're loosed at a target, it's pretty much dead, or at least thinking about going somewhere else for a while.
It's like Strength 8, AP3.
Something like that.
Of course it's AP3, everything's AP3.
Of course.
I've got to say though, backtracking a little bit, the idea of going up against 2 of those formations is pretty scary.
Yeah.
Because you were getting a lot of use out of that extra 3-inch redeploy.
We'll come to that with the formation when we come on to the formation rules. I think for me, it's a bit more tricky to decide what to do with the Skitarii, because you're running with 2 codexes rather than just one. Admittedly, they are designed to work together, so they do. There's a lot of sort of they gel quite well. Synergy. That's the word I was looking for. But due to the way that the formations work, you're actually a little bit more limited than you might think, because what I really want to add to this 500 points is another unit of Skitarii Rangers and another Onaga Dunecrawler. But I can't do that because the force organisation won't allow it, because the Skitarii don't have any HQ choices. So I can't use the Combined Arms Detachment or the Allied Detachment in order to add units. And if I do that, it means my whole force becomes unbound, and I don't get the formation.
Does the Skitarii Codex have any formations in of itself that you can use to do that?
Yes, but
because don't forget, formations count as...
Yeah, they don't really have any small ones that you can use to add into another force. They're all sort of... I think there's one that has one of each unit type in it.
Right.
Which is easily more than
the
1,000.
small ones go things like 3 units of Rust Stalkers and or Infiltrators in some combination. And that's about as small as it gets.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's the problem that I have, is that with the Skitarii side of it, you can't really build that core of... Because I like to start with a core of 20 basic build up from there. But I can't do that with that. Now, what I can do is go down more of the Cult Mechanicus route. I could have a Dominus and, say, 2 squads of Destroyers or Breachers, which are very nice. But that does mean building and painting another Dominus, which I'm not... I mean, I enjoyed painting my Dominus, but I don't know if I really want a second one.
Do they have any other HQ choices at the moment?
No.
Other than...
Belisarius Call.
Other than Belisarius Call.
I've got to say, for your next 500 points, going... I don't know how expensive the troops are, but going Belisarius Call and 3 or 6 Servitors or whatever...
That's also another option. What you could do is, although the formation is really nice, and that the ability, which we'll get onto later, is quite cool, you could take the combined formation of Mechanicus from the Fall of Cadia book as a basis, because then you can do pretty much what you have been doing, but you get stuff like all of your vehicles feel no pain.
Or you could always just decide to go unbound and we'll think less of you.
Yeah, I could do that. But yeah, so that's the interesting thing with the Skitarii one, is the fact that even though you're running from 2 different codexes, your options are a little bit more limited than you might think if you decide you want to stay with the with using the Force organisation
more
stuff.
thought is required.
You have to kind of do a little bit of sort of Force org gymnastics.
Again, though, I feel it's fair to say that the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Skitarii were released with existing players in mind.
Yes,
They
that's
were
very
not
true.
necessarily released as new players should start with these guys.
I'll come on to that when a bit later on. What about you, Paul?
Well, with the Eldar, obviously the first thing I had to do is get a second get started box to bump the unit up to actually a 500 point.
Yeah, which you didn't end up having to use in the end.
Which I didn't use, and as we'll discuss, it's probably an interesting factor to bear in mind. So I have a spare fire prism, which will obviously sit quite nicely for...
So you're kind of already on your way to making up your second 500
I'm
points.
well on my way to say it's assembled.
Yeah.
As a slight segue, I'm tempted to go down the route of some Harlequin bikes for a bit of variety. Have a few gathering dust that...
I don't remember if you said it in the intro, but the whole theme of your army is that you want nothing touching the floor.
It seems once I've got this, it seems silly to start putting foot troops in. And yes, the Harlequin bikes are pretty. So
Yeah.
Could be that. They are very pretty.
Okay, so let's talk about our formation special rules that we get with the boxes. Do you want to go first?
Yeah. Coming into this series, and as I mentioned in the opening, I really didn't think the Ethereal Honor Guard's swift redeployment rule would be particularly useful. How wrong was I?
You were very wrong.
I was incredibly wrong. That free 3-inch redeploy around a linchpin model before the movement phase was incredibly useful in a couple of scenarios to just grab objectives without having to worry too much about moving through cover.
Yeah, hopping into and out of buildings.
Hopping into and out of buildings, being able to get out and down onto a ground so my guys could run round a corner just far enough to get into rapid fire range is huge. The fact that you're allowed to do it every single turn is great. Again, I think it's like only within 12 inches of the Ethereal, but considering the way I was playing it, I stuck the Ethereal in with the Firewalls all the time because they got the best benefit from his invocations. So it was literally just I had Fire Warriors moving at least 9 inches a turn most of the time.
I think it's fair to say that your advantage, your formation bonus, had the biggest positive impact on your army of all of the formation boni.
I don't know, I thought mine was pretty good. The ability to select a target and essentially twin link all shots against that target from any unit in the formation, especially when you have weapons that fire 3 gets hot plasma shots per turn, is really quite useful.
You're already re-rolling your wands with those plasmas pretty much every time you shoot them anyway.
That's true.
And combine it with the canticles and the doctrines, it's kind of... Yeah, you have a lot to make sure that you don't miss and or re-rolls.
This is true. But I still think it was really useful. It was useful certainly in the game that I played against you, where I got to twin link against your crisis suits and so on. So everything was, I basically managed to take them out in one go.
I'm not saying everybody else's was bad. Everybody else's was bad. But I do think Andy's completely changed the way that his army functioned.
Yeah.
Whereas yours is just more of the same.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. But yeah, I quite liked the way that my one works. One slight issue with it, which is something that Games Workshop managed to screw up with is that on the card, it specifies whether you're supposed to have your troops made up as either Skitarii Rangers or Skitarii Vanguard. Now with the kit, you can build them as either of those two troop types, and there is a big difference between them as well in terms of their effective engagement range and what toys they can take with them. But some of the cards say Skitarii Rangers, and some of the cards say Skitarii Vanguard. So you're kind of...
Lucky dip.
It's kind of a lucky dip thing. Now, I think, to be honest, if people are reasonable about things, then, you know, assuming that they're aware that there's been this mix-up with the printing of it, then, you know, it shouldn't make a great deal of difference which way you've built your troops. But it does... If you're coming up against that guy, then and you don't have your models built up in this specific way, then that might be an issue.
Or if you're just a complete newbie and you didn't even realise that there was an alternative printing of the card.
Precisely,
it's
yeah.
something that you need to be aware of.
It's something that's very worth keeping aware of, and I just think it's weird that it even happened in the first place.
Oh, you think there was some weirdness with your army?
Well, should we quickly go? The Eldar ability to give guide to the Fire Prism, which is essentially the ability of twin linking the Fire Prism. Nice, simple, very effective.
Yeah, it was a nice bonus, but I didn't feel again it changed.
It didn't change
anything really.
It stopped a few scatters. It meant hit probably a bit more often, but not by.
Might have exposed your Farseer a little bit more than you had intended, but
always had to pop out with the Farseer to then try and do his shtick.
His psychic explosions.
His psychic explosions. So I don't think it would have changed significantly.
So, should we come to the elephant in the room?
I think there's two ways to look at it. Rules as intended, because I don't believe for a moment that the formation is supposed to make you choose a unit and stop it moving each turn. So rules as intended, I think it's fine. I think the ability to decide to shoot twice is a very nice bonus. What I was finding was that because I was playing it rules as written and having to do that every single
and I think
turn.
I'd like to emphasise, because you chose to run it that way to test it as intended rather than us enforcing that.
Yeah, we would never... If we were playing these just as regular games, we would never run rules as written over rules as intended.
Oh, and from now on, that's how we will do it if he wants to run that formation.
Yeah.
This was a starter box, and I thought it's important to approach this as though I was playing it with no other information, no preconceptions as to how things were supposed to go. Run that way, it turns what is already a slow army into an intolerably slow army. It stops you being able to move at all with at least 1/4 of your models. It's horrible. I hate it. I felt that in most of the games I played, I was fighting my formation as much or more as I was fighting my opponents, and that isn't how a formation is supposed to work. It also does not showcase the Space Marines as the force they're supposed to be, in my mind. Space Marines are supposed to choose their deployments, hit the ground close to the enemy, or move up very quickly in transports like Rhinos to get close to the enemy. They're not supposed to hang back and be a gun line. That's Tau and Necrons, really. So no, massively against the formation. And I would say to new players who get the box, just don't use the formation. You build a much more effective army in most circumstances by ignoring the formation completely.
Yep. I think it's a shame that it's kind of come out that way, because in theory it should be a really nice ability.
The one time I managed to actually use it effectively was against the Skitarii, because I forced you to come to me and actually got some shooting in. But against the Tau and the Eldar, it was impossible for me to force that engagement, because I was already slow, I'm already foot slogging, and now you guys are just running circles around my effective range, and that's
the jet bikes were always
yeah
going to do, but it just
it was another issue on top.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we feel the forces performed in the matchups?
I think the obvious one to start on is the Eldar, because as I emphasised at the beginning, I am technically underpointed no matter what I did by quite a significant margin.
I mean, what did you guess? How many points did you get up to when maxing out pretty much everything you could?
If I maxed out everything, I think I could get just over 400 points.
Yeah, so you're almost a fifth.
Yes. Yeah. Now the obvious counter to that is, I think particularly on the first two games where I was particularly conscious of where I was underpowered, or believed I was underpowered, I actually did very, very well. A little bit of luck came in and that powers worked well for me. But I think had it not been that it was actually the models I wanted, irrespective of the Get Started set, I wouldn't have bought it, because it's not a representative Eldar army.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel that the Skitarii performed pretty well. I was surprised at how well I did against the Tau. I was seriously expecting to lose that game.
I don't know why.
Because your effective range is so much longer. And that kind of became more of an issue in the game that I played against you.
Yeah, where I went, I'm going to sit here because that's apparently what my army's good at.
Yeah. The format, the kind of the way that the units worked, I think they work pretty much as I was expecting them to. Basically, they get within range of something and they obliterate it with plasma fire. The tricky bit is getting into range and staying into range. Again, that proved to be an issue when I was playing the Eldar, because of that additional manoeuvrability and the fact that we had quite a bit of terrain on the table as well. Meant that Paul could quite easily pop into range, do what he needed to do, and then disappear behind a building and outmaneuver me. But if they did manage to get within range and bring their full firepower to bear, they were incredibly deadly. And with a combination of the special rules that the Skitarii get and the formation, gets hot wasn't an issue. Despite having, weapons that are pretty likely to damage their own users. I think the addition of the Dune Crawler is really useful as well. Just the ability to have that firepower there is quite useful, and you can have it as your sort of your artillery. I wonder how well things would go if I picked one of the other weapons though. Obviously, it wouldn't be quite as useful if I used the Icarus array against these two guys. But against you,
technically counted against the Skimmer, and I think probably your description is fairly reflective of a Skitarii Mechanicus force. I haven't played it a couple of times now. You do have certain limitations, but as soon as anybody gets close, it's bigger guns all the way.
It's always been my opinion when I've played Mechanicus that it's all about the matchups, and you have the tools at your disposal to deal with anything your opponent can throw at you, but your issue is going to be forcing your opponent to pick the matchups you want to have, because they're very brittle against their weaknesses. And I think that was reflected in our game as well, in that your troops, once they were out in the open, died a lot.
Yeah. I mean, they're not particularly... the thing with the Skitarii is they've got not a particularly impressive stat line on their own. Where they really shine is the different toys and equipment you can give them.
Yeah.
And the special rules that with the with the canticles and the other the other thing. What's it called? Not
Doctrines.
canticles the other side. Doctrine or imperatives. They really do make up for a lot of. They kind of fill in the gaps. I feel. The trouble is, I mean, they're not amazing, but they're not terrible. So if you manage to get things working just right, then they become almost overpowering.
That has certainly been my impression when I've picked my matchups badly.
Yeah.
Going, well, you have everything you need to completely take what I've put on the table to pieces.
Exactly, yes. So they're good. But I'm not sure it's really an army that I'd recommend to new players. But I mean, we'll come back to that a bit later.
Yeah. I mean, going on to the Space Marines, if you leave aside the fact that I despise the formation and actually look at how the models themselves performed, I was underwhelmed by the Dreadnought. I took it with the expectation that the las cannon could be useful in dealing with the vehicles. The las cannon was not useful in dealing with any of the vehicles. It didn't get... I think it got one penetrating hit across all the games, which was an immobilised result, which did not really have much impact. I mean, it did...
Inconvenienced.
Yeah, but I wanted to shut down that massive blast, or the fact that you could kill the Dreadnought if you got lucky. I mean, I was lucky that you scattered a lot in our game. But I took it with the expectation of it being an anti-vehicle gun platform, and it didn't kill a single vehicle. What it was good at was slowly trundling up the field, then getting into assault and murderising things.
Which I feel is where Dreadnoughts often seem to find their niche, is as more of a sort of a shock platform rather than being a dedicated anti-vehicle thing.
Another thing that annoyed me about the set was, as I think I mentioned in the first video, you can't build the Venerable Dreadnought with the multi-melter, which is what I wanted to build it with.
If you could have built it with the multi-melter, then that would have made a bit of a difference.
Yeah.
Because you'd have been able to give it that anti-vehicle role.
On the other hand, it would have had a much smaller range, and for a lot of the games, not moving the Venerable Dreadnought was the sensible choice, because it meant it wasn't hindered by its lack of movement. The Space Marines performed exactly as I would expect Space Marines to perform, which is without transport, they died a lot to the AP3 weaponry.
Yeah.
But Space Marines are still Space Marines, and particularly one thing that stood out to me was how useful and They Shall Know No Fear actually is. In that I was watching the other games and going, well, they have to make a leadership test to continue to exist. I was rarely faced with that problem. As somebody used to playing Chaos Space Marines, that's always one of the annoying things, is when my guys break and just run off the table.
Interestingly, a lot of the sort of the meta leans towards people playing Space Marines, so
yeah.
the kind of the psychology aspects doesn't really come into play all that much. But with us, for some reason, we tend to play a lot more sort of Chaos and Xeno type armies. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, Space Marines are very much the baseline.
Yeah.
And I think we all like to specialise most of the time, which is part of the reason I was attracted to going back to the Chaos, the regular Space Marines.
Back to basics.
Yeah, was to go. I really like the idea of an army that excels at the bread and butter, and has something it can do in assault, something it can do in regular range, something it can do devastators. It's all good stuff. I didn't feel that this set really showed that off much, but I've talked about that. So.
How did the Tau do?
Well, about as well as I could expect, considering, I was the one rolling dice. So,
Andy is famously bad at rolling dice.
yeah, if any of you caught any of the dice rolls on in the videos, you can see how badly I can get. Versus you, Steve, well, you were the first game and my first loss. Tau are very often known for their firepower in the field, but even though we let you use 3 Pires per Cavaliers, even though there weren't 3 in the set, that's how you would have built them in the future. I don't. The sheer weight of fire that your guys can throw out is quite staggering, and then combine that with the essentially free Canticles and Doctrina, it's frankly ridiculous. It's honestly ridiculous. I mean, I certainly could have positioned my models better, done more with the ethereal.
The trouble is, I mean, there's two ways you could have played that. The first way was the way that you did, which was to try and move up and try and score objectives.
Yeah.
The second way is to hang back and just attack me from range. But whilst you're doing that, you can't also be claiming objectives and scoring points. So
yeah, it's like I said, I didn't really twig what was going on with the ethereal, because I think that's the only game that the ethereal died in.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so you got 2 victory points for that, one for slaying the warlord and one for killing an ethereal. But in the long run, I don't think anything I could have changed would have done much to the outcome. It's just one of those things. It was just.
I feel like you underestimated the firepower that the Skitarii could put out. Next time, I think if you played more conservatively, you'd win. Because your weapons are AP4, aren't they?
No, they're AP5, but they've got a 30-inch range.
Yeah.
So they're strength 5 as well, so they're wounding on 2s. The biggest problem, I suppose, is the Tau's naturally low ballistic skill, which is weird for an army that relies on guns.
Yeah, they have reconciled this in the fluff with they have really poor depth perception. Actual thing in the original Tau Codex. What? The xenobiology has the Imperial expert for the xenobiology said they had their eyesight was terrible because they didn't have great depth perception.
Which I suppose makes sense because the army's designed to rely on the marker lights to boost that.
And I think as you get into higher points value games, you have more marker lights to make up for that.
Yeah.
The Space Marine one is the matchup that I really felt I had an advantage in. I had the manoeuvrability and I had the firepower to sort of deal with it. When you're hitting on 4s, so that's half the time, and then wounding Space Marines on 3, and pretty much anything else that I fought over these games on 2s, with my basic troops, it was really a case of, okay, I've got the advantage because the Space Marines can be quite slow when they don't have transports, and they're very few in number.
From my perspective with that game, I was trying to move the Tactical Marines up to Assault Tau because Tau were famously bad in Assault. Your 3-inch redeploy meant I was trying to move slowly up the table. You're suddenly in my face and rapid firing me off the table.
Yes, that definitely did help. The Crisis team versus Dreadnought and Captain fight was something that should never have happened, and I'm an idiot for doing it.
I still find myself wondering why you let that happen.
Because I was hoping to overwatch the Captain and or Dreadnought to death, but it didn't happen because dice.
Right.
I think it was pity.
Pity.
I mean, the game was objectively closer than it should have been.
Yeah.
But I in the end I did win. But It was one of those games that started out well, towards the middle, sphincters were tightening, and then it got better.
It would be very interesting to me to redo that battle, replacing the captain with his relic with a chapter master.
Yeah, and actually
dropping a massive pie plate on the crisis suits instead.
And perhaps not even, or even just doing that again with the formation as intended instead of as written. Because having that option means your army speeds up quite a lot.
I think the biggest problem that you had with that was you were struggling a lot against that rule in
that
game.
Yeah, very much so.
Because you were you'd sort of gotten yourself stuck in that you couldn't do what you wanted to do because the rules were preventing you from doing it.
Yeah, and again, as Paul said a few times, it's because I was being bloody minded about the interpretation.
No.
But that's very fair. I was annoyed by the rule. I wanted to showcase how annoying this rule was.
For Eldar, it was very much one thought of stand still, you bloody knife-eared gits. But
which is often the thought people have with Eldar.
Yeah. My initial thought was I've got to hit Paul's army hard and I've got to hit it fast. Otherwise, I'm not going to live to see turn 3. My one advantage is, the one main advantage is that whilst the jet bikes can duck and dive in and out of cover pretty much every turn. The DSV-8 tactical turret with the smart missile system, meaning I've got a 30-inch, doesn't need line of sight, ignores cover, 4 shots of strength 5 missiles.
It's a jet bike killer.
It's a jet bike killer,
Yeah.
and that's what it did first turn, and that's what it consistently did. It even took out the tank at the end. The Fire Warriors didn't actually do anything that turn. They were literally just there as ablative wounds for the turret
And the ethereal.
It's kind of
who also didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Because the ethereal, the great thing about ethereals is that they give these invocations now. They can empower troops with the ability to fire another shot at half range. So instead of it being rapid fire and you get 2 shots, you get 3.
In that so that they can actually be useful, as opposed to a total liability, which is what they used to be.
Yes, you definitely consider taking an ethereal. I probably wouldn't recommend 2 because then you're just giving away free victory points if they start dying. But
there's also some interesting opponent psychology in that your opponent will know there's an extra victory point there, so you can use the ethereal as bait.
Yes, and get them caught in a trap.
Yeah. In the end, I got down to an ethereal, a fire warrior, a drone, and 2 crisis suits, and had tabled Paul
By psychology, which is an interesting observation.
by psychology, by making the last jet bike run away, but that sheer domination of the psychic phase that the Farseer had.
One thing that really stood out to us as well was how much quicker the game goes without a psychic phase.
Yeah.
The Tau Space Marine game was about half the time of the other games.
Yep. Yeah. Same with the Skitarii one as well, even though it went into 5 turns.
Yeah. Things move much quicker if you don't have psychic powers.
Yeah. Speaking of psychic powers,
Yeah.
how did your Eldar do?
A lot better than I expected.
Yeah.
I think the number of it. As I say, my ideal force at 500 points using that type of model would have ended up with 6 jet bikes, a Warlock, and a Fire Prism, and a Farseer, which would have only added tedium of the psychic
I
phase.
actually think if you'd had a 500 point force built out of those models, I think you'd have been it would have been overwhelming for.
Well, I think
the rest
certainly.
of us.
I mean, bearing in mind the amount of Shuriken cannon.
Well, as an example, you're the only one out of us that managed to beat him. Do you think you could have done it if you'd had another 3 bikes?
I would have definitely struggled. If he'd had thrown a Warlock in there as well, I don't think I would have.
Well, the Warlock would have added limited editions.
So if I start having the stuff that I would have, if I start taking a Chapter Master instead of ridiculous upgrades, or if I just don't use the formation, I think it becomes a much different game, because the thing I need is to pin you down.
Yeah.
So having a weapon that can do that
Makes sense.
immediately changes the entire way the game goes.
Yeah.
I think the big observation we've all seen with the Eldar force is it doesn't feel particularly representative of Eldar. I think comments on psychics, if you're trying to do it as a new player get started, an Autark on jet bike in that force instead of a Farseer would have changed things out again.
Yeah.
I think
I would have liked to have seen a sort of a new special Autark on jet bike model as well. On one of the new Wind Rider jet bikes, I think that would have looked really cool.
Yeah.
Maybe with a the long rifle that the Eldar can get.
Or
maybe with a special sort of
laser lance.
Yeah,
There,
that'd be
there
cool.
are many options there.
But-
missed opportunities.
From what I understand about the interaction of playing Eldar, it's that you have an abundance of D weaponry, and you didn't have a single D weapon.
and I have very little intent of taking any D weapons.
But if that's the reason you play Eldar, surely they should try and get one into the 500 point starter set.
Which could easily be done, I'm sure.
But
Yeah.
That very much would be the I don't want any friends starter kit.
Well, yes,
Well, you're already playing Eldar, but let's be fair. Games Workshop are nothing if not a little pragmatic in this respect. They don't want to have to start issuing more small child got strangled by their opponent forms than is already necessary.
Yeah, there's all sorts of paperwork and stuff you have to fill out with that sort of thing.
So, I mean, I think I'm still very much of two minds on that set. As I say, I've now gone and bought 2 of them, and I'm very happy with my purchase.
Yep. Well, see, that's an interesting thing, and we'll come to that when we do whether we'll overall recommend it, because I think your answer will be interesting for that. Should we talk about how the kits were to put together and paint and any issues that
there
they
were
had with
Space Marines.
Yeah, we kind of already touched on this in the introduction videos, but after looking at them a bit more, I really like the towel. As I said, I haven't played them since the beginning of 5th edition, so that's about 9 years ago ish, and the quality of the kit and the options now, and just how much easier and better they go together.
Is there much difference in the actual Fire Warrior kit in terms of how they go together?
As a pure strike team, not really. It's still, glue torso to backpack, glue head on stuff, but it's just they seem to, as with all modern Games Workshop models, they've crammed so much more onto that sprue.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have the option to make them a breacher team, don't you?
Yeah.
I think your paint scheme looked badass as well. I think it came out really nice.
Yeah, there was the reason I chose to copy the current Poster Boy Tau scheme. It's just that it does look nice, and being a Gundam fan, I kind of do want to start painting up my mechs in various colour schemes like that. But if you have, I think using the base white as a sort of canvas to have these standout mechs and hotshot pilots against.
And you'll have to green stuff some V's.
That'll be easy. Don't worry about that. It's either that, or I'll use plasticard, or I'll just steal them off various Gundam
Like
kits
the
I've got
crash
lying
that
around.
go on the forehead.
Yes, those things.
With the Skitarii, I really like the Skitarii and AdMech models. I think they look freaking awesome. They've got this kind of mad, almost sort of Z-Rust look to them. With that sort of, but they have that kind of grimy, almost sort of Strogg from Quake 4 type look to them.
Mad Max is what my
yeah, and they I think they just look really awesome. They are a little bit fiddly though. Sometimes because they're so detailed, getting things cut off the sprue and making sure you've cut the bit of the sprue away properly and not destroying the detail is a bit tricky. Also with the Dune Crawler as well, all those railings on the side of it and the the hand railings and stuff are all separate components which you have to cut out.
There is a very good reason why I've got no safety valve.
Why you've not done them?
Dune Crawlers.
I think they look really cool if you do them, but they are a pain in the butt to actually cut out
Life
and
is too
glue in
short
properly.
for that safety railing.
One thing I've learned from making Gundam kits is it's a different plastic. It's much I want to say brittler, but it's when you just tap the plastic, you can tell the difference. Is that instead of trying to cut the piece away from the sprue straight away, is to go further up the gate, cut that away, and then you can actually get it the piece away from the sprue. Cut it, puts less stress marks on the actual piece, and it means you can actually get your clippers into an angle that's comfortable to try and get the detail off.
So it's all little things like that. I think with painting them, I'm quite pleased with the paint job I managed to do on them. I think the orange looks pretty cool.
You need to get the landers on them.
Yeah, I've got plans for how I'm going to improve them in the future, which will look really cool as well. But I think if you were a new player, I think they might be a little bit daunting to paint, in a way. I think that you could paint them sort of fairly roughly and get them looking good. Yeah. Because you could just paint the metallic components metal and dry brush them and then paint the cloaks and you'd have them looking okay. But because there is so much detail on them, I think it might put some people off a little bit if they weren't quite so sure about whether they could get their painting.
It's the difference of
good.
knowing that having a lot of detail means that sometimes you have less work to do.
Yeah.
Whereas painting a large flat area can be.
I don't know
involved.
if 12-year-old me would have even noticed the detail, to be honest.
Quite possibly, yeah. maybe it's just me sort of
Yeah.
wanting to paint everything.
If you like, I think it's much easier to do each individual model in the Skitarii army set to a standard that looks genuinely impressive. I think Space Marines are Space Marines are Space Marines.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to get a model that people look at and go, my God, that's the best painted tactical marine I've ever seen.
I mean, it might be possible, but then you send it to Golden Demon and grab yourself a sword.
I wonder, as a slight aside, I wonder when the last time a tactical marine won Golden Demon.
We can probably look that up.
Yeah.
If it was on a 6-inch plinth.
Yeah, and as part of a diorama or something.
I think, and something we saw early when I was putting together the fire prism, because I was muttering and cursing. The actual base Falcon frame is quite old now.
That was, I remember when that first released, that was back when I first started playing.
I'd been playing for a little bit at that point.
I mean,
but,
it was a little bit, yeah. I remember being really quite impressed with it when it first came out, but
it assembles okay, and
it's kind of showing its age, is it?
But you don't have those crisp, sharp joint lines that you've got on those others. Your Omnibus will have gone together a lot smoother because they've got the well-engineered joint lines, so you actually have a surface to glue.
And just the new the new models that GW release in general are really high quality these days.
I mean, you can tell where they've used the they've constructed it digitally and then they've kind of sliced it up on the computer and then used that to build up the sprues, and it gives you that much finer. It gives you a much sort of tighter join, and it allows you to get things that are really so much more detailed than they used to be able to.
It does lead to some interesting ones that have to be assembled where you go, but this bit doesn't fit in there unless I twist this and stand on one leg.
Yeah.
But these are details that occur. Not mentioning any Death Jesters, I think was the one that.
Oh yeah. That was entertaining.
But yeah, I think that was the only detail that I came out of painting them. I've kept the paint scheme fairly simplistic, but it looks.
It's very striking.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think all of the paint schemes came out really nicely. Mine's obviously
blue.
Because Ultramarines.
But I had a lot of fun painting them. I did it over Christmas. It felt like Christmas more than 10 years ago. Just depressing. but
it's I guess it's a nice project that you can do over a period of a couple of weeks and have something cool looking at the end of it. Right?
Yeah, and I'm really happy with how a couple of those models came out. I'm less happy with how some of the other models in the set came out.
Like the Dreadnought.
Well, I hate Dreadnought. But that's to do with my distaste for the model in general. So
it's a box on legs.
Yeah, and it really does annoy me that you can't build it at its basic level. If you're going to have the base stats for something, have a particular gun, include the gun. Ideally, include all of the options as it can be built with, but at least include the base one, for God's sake.
Okay, so overall recommendations then. Would you, considering that these are marketed as start collecting boxes, so the idea behind these is obviously if you're, if you don't have any of the models from this army already, this is a good place to start. Would you guys recommend your kits to people, and what kind of is there anything sort of you'd want to add to that in terms of caveats or whatever?
Well, I think I'll start with mine, and I've back forward on this a couple of times. I think if you ask me, would I generally recommend this? No.
Despite having bought 2 of the kits and being very happy with
them. 2
them.
of the kits, enjoying them, all the rest of it. If you're trying to start collecting to play the general Craft World Eldar, This does not feel like the right box to recommend to somebody.
I do wonder whether it will do better with the new stuff. Whether you could use it as the Craft World Eldar contingent in the new combined Eldar.
You can bolt it into other armies, but if you are start collecting Craft World Eldar, it would seem more logical to go with the Dire Avenger and I think it's a Wave Serpent box and a Farseer or something.
Yeah.
Maybe even a Warwalker
or whatever. And you would end up with a more
How much D do those models have between
None.
them? Really?
Yeah.
You see, still, I feel
I'm
like
still
you're missing
doing it
something.
wrong. Yes.
So your thoughts can basically be summarised as not that good as a start collecting set, but as a standalone formation, as a bolt onto an existing army.
As a bolt onto an existing army, as a standalone formation, I like these models, I want to play with these models.
Yeah. It was the core to a weird list, which is what, I mean, you generally do theme lists, you don't do lists.
I work out what I'm going to do and build off of that thematic.
Yeah.
I think the only one that's not true has been the Mechanicum Scutari, when I've just gone...
We've just gone, all the things, I want them all!
But again, they are inherently a themed list.
Yes.
So, if someone said, I like them, I want to buy those models, knock yourself out. You've saved yourself 25 plus quid. You can afford your codex or whatever you want to get next.
Yeah.
Great saving. Get started. I like the Eldar Craft World as a general.
It's not
it's
really
not
there.
what you've got.
I mean, it's funny because going into this, we all looked at the Eldar box and went, that's just going to lose against everything. There's nothing in it.
Yeah. And it actually ended up being
models.
And it actually ended up being really strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is you have a level 3 Psyker in that contingent. It just changes that stuff.
Yeah.
And you're a player who knows the game inside and out.
There is
one
that.
or two.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what about you?
The caveat I would put on it is don't use the formation.
Or
don't
make sure you're playing against someone who has sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, either use the formation rules as intended, which turns the choice into a choice.
Well, it turns it into a choice rather than a...
Or split the tactical squad, combined arms detachment, go.
That
You start
said-
a very nice army.
Yeah, in terms of what you get in the box, it's almost there. Now, I've had a lot of discussions with people about this over the weeks, and I think it would have been much better if they'd given it a Rhino or a Drop Pod or a Razorback or whatever instead of the Dreadnought. And I don't think that's just because I hate Dreadnoughts, although it's always
I mean,
difficult
the
to be
particular
objective.
Dreadnought doesn't feel...
Yeah, no, if it'd been a basic one and probably instead of the Venerable, then...
Yeah.
And I feel like that would teach you how to play most core Space Marine armies because you need that protection for your guys. They're good, but they're few in number, and every single one you lose really hurts.
Yeah.
But that said, as the basis of an army, as the thing you're going to build out from, and the very first thing you're going to buy after that is a Rhino or a Drop Pod from the savings that you've made from getting the core box, and because you want a Dreadnought, because you're a horrible human being, yeah, go for it. It's good enough. I mean, again, there's a few things that I feel you want to expand out of to get the most out of. I think having the captain in Terminator armour is an odd choice. I would field him in Artificer armour to be with the Tactical Marines, ideally. But if the thing you're going to buy after you've bought the Drop Pod and the Rhino is a squad of Terminators, suddenly having the Terminator captain makes a lot more sense. So, as the core to an army to build out from, I think it's difficult to complain too much about that.
I think with the Scutari set, I thought long and hard about whether I would actually recommend it or not. And I think ultimately it comes down to who I'm making the recommendation to. The Scutari and Cult Mechanicus armies on their own as separate entities are quite rules intensive. If you have, but with this you're running the two codexes both together. You have 2 codexes worth of rules to learn. I mean, granted, you've only got one model from the Mechanicum, but you still have the special rules and all that stuff.
You get a chunk of the rules out of that.
Yeah. And you know, in terms of how you can build out from the army, it's a little bit more complicated because you need to do a little bit of mental gymnastics in terms of how you're going to add more models into this.
Would a new player do that? I think
this is my point. If I was recommending this to a new player, I would not recommend they go with the Skitarii box, even though you make a reasonable saving on the models.
Or make sure that they're approaching it with the understanding that they're probably going to sideline the Dominus for a short period of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Again,
but if I were recommending to somebody who already plays 40k, is kind of familiar with how the rules work, they have an idea of where they want to take the force in the future, or they're just curious about trying the Skitarii and Mechanicum as an army, I think it works really well for that. I think it gives you some good models, some cool looking units that you can use.
If you're going with anything mechanical, you're going to end up with Dominus.
Yep.
So bonus. If you aren't fielding Skitarii in the Skitarii army, I don't know how you've done that. And the Onagers are just excellent little walker tank things.
Yeah.
You see, what occurs to me is that when I think back to the attitude I took towards list building when I was 12 years old and just starting out, I didn't get it. I didn't care about that kind of thing. I went, those models look cool, I want to use those models. And I think the new Unbound rules, we make fun of it a fair amount, even though some of us use Unbound more than others. But I think it makes it much easier to get around that aspect of it. You're not going to build the greatest force in the world Unbound, but if you're just going, well, I want to use this, that and the other, why not?
As an interim state,
it
makes a lot of sense, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think it is the point Steve would make, and probably the point I would make, is if you were suggesting it to someone, you would want to make sure that your caveats and the understanding of why you're recommending it was there.
It's a difficult army
Yeah.
compared to a lot of the others.
Yeah.
It is not a marine army which has, as you say, generalists.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's not an army that I personally would recommend to people who are just learning how to play 40k for the first time.
That's fair. That's entirely fair.
If the player already knows 40k and just wants to try something new, then it's a good set for that. I think, and that pretty much sums up what my thoughts are on it. What about the Tau?
If you're a brand new player to start an army for 40k, and for some reason you haven't chosen Space Marines,
It happens.
it happens.
I chose orcs.
You poor soul. That probably explains a few things.
This Start Collecting Tau Empire box is pretty much a great way to start. It's got everything that you need to understand how the Tau are meant to play. It's got your your line troops, which will do more for you than you expect. It's got the vulnerable but valuable ethereal HQ choice, and it's got everyone's favourite thing in Tau armies. It's got its core mechs. It's got its battle suits.
And I mean, unlike Eldar, where you don't have the D, which is the only reason to play Eldar, you have the crisis suits. That is what every Tau player wants, isn't it?
Generally, yeah. I mean, unless you're Paul, who looks at the list and gone, you know what I would have done? Entirely Kroot. And I mean, that's a really cool army idea. But if
That's not to get started.
it's not to get started, so it's definitely one that you need a few years' experience behind you because they're not.
Or you need to be approaching it in a mindset.
Approaching in a
And I
mindset.
think that's what the Eldar box set is. It's Kroot up. If it was in Tau, it would be get started Tau.
his troops. Yeah.
Yeah.
With some Vespid support.
Oh yeah, naturally, yeah, because everybody needs Vespids in their army.
But it's got everything that you need to essentially get started. And you can easily go in one of about 3 different ways with how to build the force. You want more suits, you want more troops, you're going to start throwing vehicles in to give these guys support. It gives you a taste of how formations are supposed to work, and it's a positive one. It's not going to be great in the sense of comparatively twin linking your weapons or twin linking your tanks, cannon.
Genuinely, I think it was much better than those.
It was much better in the sense that I could use it every time effectively, but that's 14 years of playing the game experience.
I think that is partly due to Andy's experience as a wargamer.
I do worry just a little bit that a new player who's gotten used to using that 3-inch deployment, if that's how they've learned, that's how they think about the game, it might take them a little bit when they start moving beyond it to units that can't do that to learn the positioning.
Yeah,
it is easy to use things like that as a crutch.
It is a mistake cover-up. Many times, as I'm sure viewers have seen over the games, I had positioned my Fire Warrior great for a turn, but I wasn't obviously thinking a turn ahead or like where Tom's combat squad would end up. And then I was able to just sort of, okay, now they're down there, they're forward, and that's that combat squad dealt with.
Yeah.
It covers a lot of mistakes, but once you start moving on to some sort of the other formations, you might need to start considering how you're going to set up these models. But for getting into how the Tau mindset of very much working together, mutual support, and covering your ethereals, it's a brilliant set. I do recommend it to anyone who's interested in playing Tau.
Cool. Okay, I think that pretty much covers everything.
I think so. We've been talking for about an hour.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to edit.
What do you mean edit? We just put titles in front and titles at the end and hit upload.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Right, so when can we see your Crew army, Paul?
Around about the same time when one of us manages to get a tactical marine into Winter Slayer sword.
Okay, yeah. I'll get started on that then.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, well, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next series of videos.
See ya.